Welcome back to the Selling Point Podcast. If you're a CEO and you feel like your team is constantly losing deals because of price, I want you to hear this really clearly. Too expensive is usually not a pricing problem. It's usually a discovery issue. Pricing objections show up at the end of a sales process, but they almost always start earlier. When the salesperson didn't uncover enough specificity about the problem, the impact, the urgency, and how the buyer will make their buying decision. I'm your host, Anthony Nix, and I am the founder and chief fractional sales leader of Transformative Sales Systems. And what we're going to do right now is we're going to try to connect the dots between sales qualification, which we've been talking about over these last several episodes, and price objections. And I'm going to give you some practical ways to reduce discounting without changing your pricing. CEOs get frustrated by price objections. And here's why this topic is so frustrating for the person in the owner's seat. You know you've got a great product or service. You know that it is strong. You know your team delivers. And you also know your margins matter because you are not running a not-for-profit. But you keep hearing the same thing. They said we were too expensive. And the natural reaction in that situation is to assume the market is just getting cheaper, or the competition is undercutting, or buyers don't value quality anymore. And honestly, sometimes that could be true, and that might be that you're talking to the wrong possible customers. And that's an episode we'll get into here in a few more on ideal customer profiles. But most of the time, what's happening is the buyer never built a strong case for change in their mind. So when the proposal lands, the buyer has nothing to compare except a number. And that's how good companies get squeezed into discounting to continue to win business. Let's get really serious on the connection between sales qualification and pricing objection. We've been discussing, sales qualification, like I said, in the last several episodes. And it's the discipline of requiring proof before you invest deeper time and resources into an opportunity. Price objections happen when your value is not clearly established and the buyer doesn't have a strong reason to pay what you charge. How does that connect? Well, weak qualification creates generic value in the mind of the customer. Generic value creates commodity comparisons. And once you're viewed as a commodity, that is when you're going to start hearing price objections. If your salesperson advances deals based on interest and optimism and hopium instead of actual proof, they are setting themselves up to get hit with it's too expensive at the late stages of the opportunity. Now, when a buyer says too expensive, that could mean a few things. It can mean they generally don't have a budget to spend. It can mean that they had a different number in mind. It could mean they're comparing you to someone who is actually cheaper. It could mean that they don't understand what they're getting. It could mean they don't believe the problem is urgent enough to spend the money. And it can mean they don't trust the outcome. Most salespeople treat too expensive like a moment that they've got to overcome. They start trying to justify and they start defending. They start negotiating basically against themselves. Or they go straight to discounting to keep the deal alive. A better approach is to treat too expensive as a signal that discovery and qualification wasn't strong enough. Because when the buyer sees the problem clearly and feels the impact, price price doesn't disappear, but now it becomes contextualized. It becomes an investment decision instead of a shopping decision. The biggest lever to reduce price objection is impact. Impact on that particular or that prospect, that potential customer. If discovery doesn't qualify an impact for the customer, well, your proposal's, it's going to look like an expense. When the buyer understands the impact, your proposal now becomes an investment in their business. That's what we are trying to achieve, that understanding in the customer's mind. Impact could be like lost revenue, or it could be margin erosion. It could be, if we're talking about manufacturing, it could be rework costs. It might be equipment downtime. It might be missed production. It could be a safety risk. It could just be churn or inefficiency that has been tolerated for too long. So whatever it is, your salesperson has to get it out into the open during discovery. Because if impact stays, vague and undefined, your urgency stays weak. And if urgency stays weak, buyers continue to shop and price is all that they know to compare. So what are the sales qualification criteria that reduces price pressure? Well, before your sales team ever quotes a number or sends out a proposal, they should be able to answer these questions clearly and in English, plain English, and not use the word assume. They've asked the question and they know the answer. So here's a list. What specific problem are we trying to solve? What's the impact of that problem on your business? Why is this important now? And better yet, what happens if you delay? How are you going to evaluate the options and what criteria matter most? Who decides? And how does that decision get made? What does success look like after implementation? And what is the next step? And when is it scheduled? If your salesperson can't answer those, they shouldn't be quoting anything yet. Because quoting without those answers is just like writing a prescription. Let's talk about this like as a doctor. It'd be like writing a prescription without a diagnosis. And you might get lucky, but you're just mostly guessing. And guessing is how we end up having to negotiate on price. So here's the discovery mistake that creates commodity comparisons. The rep talks about their solution too early in the conversation, in the discovery. They start explaining about features and capabilities, or how we're different and what they do, before the buyer has defined the problem in a way that matters. So what happens? Well, all the buyer hears is a bunch of claims that sound like everyone else. Quality, service, experience, responsiveness, we care. Every competitor says those exact same things. When discovery is too shallow, you don't go deep enough, you can't differentiate yourself. And if you can't differentiate yourself, the buyer's default, again, is just to compare price. This is why too expensive actually started at the beginning of the sales process during discovery. It's not because the rep said the wrong thing at the end. It's because they never built value early. So let's talk about the moment every salesperson hears. We have a cheaper option, says the client or prospect. The worst thing your rep can do is immediately discount or attack the competitor. The better move here is to go back to qualification, go back to the decision criteria, ask more questions, ask things like, when you compare options, what matters most besides price? Ask, what happens if this doesn't work out the way you need it to? Ask, what does success look like after implementation? Another one might be, what are you trying to avoid with this decision? Finally, how will you decide? What's the criteria? Those questions re-anchor the decision around outcome and risk, not cost. And if the buyer insists price is the only factor, well, that's clarity also. That might mean that this isn't your deal. And that's okay. Because disqualifying the wrong opportunities, well, that protects your margin, that protects your sales team's time, and that is a good thing. Now, if we go ahead and we send the proposal before it is qualified, this is where we get ghosted. In most small and mid-sized businesses, sales proposals often go out because the buyer asked for it, not because the deal is actually qualified. And when a proposal goes out without a scheduled review meeting to go over that proposal, you lose control. You have no leverage over how it is evaluated. It gets forwarded and sent to others in the organization. It gets compared line by line. It gets misunderstood. It gets used as leverage with another vendor. A strong standard is simple. No proposal goes out without a scheduled proposal review confirmed. That meeting is where your pricing gets connected back to impact. Requirements that the customer has gets confirmed. You revalidate the decision criteria. And the next steps get owned. Without that meeting, you're training buyers to treat you like a quote machine. And believe me, I have many clients that have become quote machines for their customers or for the prospects that they're chasing after. So if you're a CEO and you want to reduce discounting, here's what you can do. Stop rewarding pipeline volume without pipeline quality. Just adding things to the pipeline isn't the solution. They have to be qualified opportunities. A bloated pipeline makes everybody feel really good and really productive, and your close rates plummet and you start losing margin. In deal reviews, when you hear too expensive, don't jump straight to pricing strategy. Ask qualifying questions. Basically, compared to what? Based on what criteria? What impact did we quantify? What happens if you do nothing? When is the next decision meeting scheduled? If those answers are vague, the fix is not discounting. The fix is tightening discovery and qualification standards. So here's kind of the bottom line on this. Pricing objections show up at the end, but they usually start in discovery. If discovery was too shallow, didn't dig deep enough, your value just stays generic. And if the value is generic, well, price becomes the only comparison point that customer can look at. You don't handle price objections better by learning new rebuttals. You prevent them by qualifying better, quantifying impact, clarifying decision criteria, and owning next steps. If you want help installing these standards and coaching your team through real deals, that's exactly what we do here at Transformative Sales Systems through our fractional sales management services. And you can find additional information in the description of this podcast, or you can visit transformativesalessystems.com. And transformative sales systems is one long word. So we're going to continue talking about qualifications in the continuation of this series, and our next one's going to be about decision criteria, which is kind of that next qualifying step in a sales process. So I hope you guys will look for that one, and we appreciate the fact that you are listening and paying attention and commenting. I do enjoy those and the conversations back and forth. So until next time, onward.